Hello again. Thanks for tuning in to Mr. Ulrich's LandofBiology.com. I am Mr. Ulrich. In this video, we're going to be looking at the human respiratory system. Please don't make the mistake of confusing this with cellular respiration. Just because it has the word respiration in it doesn't mean that they are the same thing. Okay, the fact that I mentioned that in the first frame tells you how big and widespread of a problem it is of people confusing the respiratory system with cellular respiration. They are connected. The respiratory systems provide the gas exchange necessary for cellular respiration. So if we think back, cellular respiration, is the breakdown of glucose in order to get usable energy for the cell. I got this diagram from, I think, Wikipedia. And even they put just respiration as glucose and oxygen yielding carbon dioxide and water and usable energy. I had to add in a little cellular here. Even this isn't completely complete, if I can be repetitively redundant. That should really say aerobic cellular respiration. In any sense, the gas exchange that's taking place here for aerobic cellular respiration is oxygen in. For any respiration, it's going to be carbon dioxide out. Respiratory surfaces are those parts of an organism that are adapted for gas exchange with the environment. It doesn't matter which organism we're talking about, they're going to have three characteristics in common for their respiratory surface. They're going to be thin. This is to allow gases to get through them. Being thick would make it a little more difficult. They're going to be moist. The liquid phase helps diffusion take place, since this is the primary mechanism by which these gases are going to be exchanged. And certainly they need to be highly vascularized with capillaries. At least, since not all organisms are going to have capillaries, they at least need to be associated with some sort of transport system. Since different organisms have different adaptations for their respiratory surfaces, let's look at some examples. Worms, their skins are thin and moist, and if you look very close at them, you can even see the blood vessels that go through them. They are certainly highly vascularized, so the skin provides them with their respiratory surface. Hey, even lowly amoeba are going to have to exchange gases with their environment. Theirs is going to be a little more simple. It's going to be right at the cell membrane itself. This is certainly in contact with the watery environment. It's certainly thin, and it is in contact with the cytoplasm, which is going to be moving, and that's going to be their transport mechanism, the cyclosis, the streaming of the cytoplasm. Fish are going to use their gills. Gills are certainly, if you look very closely at them, the individual leaves of the gills are very thin-walled. They are certainly wet, if all is going well for the fish anyway. And the reason why they're pink is because they are highly vascularized. And humans, their respiratory surface is going to be, once again, within their lungs, tiny air sacs within the lungs called alveoli. And, this kind of leads us into the next section, where we're going to start to take a look at some of the parts of the human respiratory system. Okay, the parts. We're going to trace the flow of air for naming purposes. We're going to trace the flow of air into the system. I know you can breathe in through your mouth, but as far as the respiratory system goes, it's probably better to breathe through your nose, air going in through the nostril and into the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is filled with mucus and hair that are going to trap all kinds of particulate matter that you really don't want in your lungs. It also has lots of channels and moisture in order to humidify and warm up the air before it goes down into the respiratory system. That little asterisk next to nasal cavity means that that part is fair game for a quiz or a test. So once the air is warmed, filtered, and humidified, it moves past the uvula, which is really doesn't need to be in this diagram, but it's got a line and a number, so we'll name it. It goes past the epiglottis, which is going to be open. That's the trapdoor that's going to close during swallowing to keep food going down the esophagus and not going down the windpipe, which we'll get to here in just a moment. So the air is going to move into the top of the windpipe, which is called the larynx. That's where those vocal folds are that vibrate like stretching the neck of a balloon and letting air go out. So once the air goes past those vocal folds or through the larynx, it's going to make its way into the trachea. The trachea is the windpipe. It's held open by those cartilaginous rings, keeps it from collapsing. Those trachea are going to branch, or that trachea is going to branch into the bronchi, and each lung gets one bronchi, so it's from here that the air is going to actually be in the lungs themselves. Those bronchi inside of the lung are going to branch into smaller and smaller bronchioles, and those bronchioles are going to terminate at these little bunches of grapes, they look like. Each one of those little sacs is called an alveolus. Those bunches together, it's alveoli, that's plural. And these are the functional unit of the lungs. This is where the gas exchange itself is going to take place. So to look a little closer, each bronchiole has running along it arterioles and venules. These are very small arteries and veins that are going to branch into the capillaries that surround each individual alveolus. So there we have a thin-walled structure that has capillaries. It is moist and it is a respiratory surface. So having lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of alveoli really helps to increase the amount of respiratory surface area that you have. But of course, in order to have gas exchange take place, you have to move the atmosphere in and out of the alveoli themselves. This is going to be done by the action of the diaphragm. As the diaphragm relaxes, that actually pushes up on the lungs and compresses them and will squeeze the air out. The outside of the lung is actually a tough membrane called a pleura. It's airproof, so that when the diaphragm pushes up and relaxes and pushes up on the lungs, the air doesn't squeeze out the sides of the lungs. It just goes out the bronchi and out the trachea and out its merry way. For such important structures as lungs, we tend to abuse them. In the middle of this diagram, here in the center, is an artist's rendition of a cross-section of a group of alveoli. In that healthy, normal bronchiole and alveoli, you can see the bronchiole is open, and each alveolus has its own individual walls are intact. In someone with emphysema, which is a disorder that's brought on usually by smoking, you can see the constriction in the bronchiole, as well as all the internal walls of those alveoli are starting to break down, and so instead of having lots of little small alveoli, you have one big huge bag. It also has lost its elasticity, so it's not going to shrink back down once it's filled up with air. So emphysema, tough disorder, and mostly avoidable. As a teacher, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't address directly the issues between smoking and human lung health. Here's a picture of a perfectly healthy lung, other than the fact that it's out of a body. If we compare that with one of someone who was a smoker, I think you can see the damage that has taken place, especially in the upper part of the lungs. One of the dangers that goes along with picking up a smoking habit is thinking that if you quit if you smoke when you're younger and then quit as you get older, your lungs will be able to heal. First off, it's very hard to quit, and so a lot of people who think that they're going to be able to quit find it almost impossible to do so, if not impossible to do so. The second problem is that our lungs aren't very good at getting pollutants out of them once they're in there. And this is a picture of a cross-section of a lung of a lifetime smoker, and each one of those little black blobs is a wad of tar that is filling up the alveoli in the upper region of one of the lungs. Once the tar gets in there, there are cells that will consume the tar and kind of move it to the outer regions of the lung to kind of concentrate it and keep at least a region of the lung healthy. But it's really hard for the lungs to come back from that much smoking. I guess that's probably a good place to leave it. Once again, thanks for tuning in to Mr. Ulrich's landofbiology.com. I hope you've been using the supporting material that's available for download on the website. By all means, you can certainly email me with any questions, comments, or feedback. And if you have any other material, pictures, graphics, things that you would like or think would be a good addition to my presentations here, certainly send them in. If you're a student of mine, that would be worthy of extra credit. Once again, thanks for checking in, and we'll see you in class.